Good afternoon and half a day. The Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Monday, June 21st, 2021, and the time now is 2 o'clock. Notice for this budget hearing was disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was issued on June 11th, followed by June 15th, and today is June 21. The committee will hear and accept testimonies on Bill 55-36 COR, the Fiscal Year 2022 Appropriation Act, as requested by the Governor, relative to the Department of Revenue and Taxation's Fiscal Year Budget request. Joining me this afternoon is Oversight Chair for Revenue and Tax, Senator Sabina Perez, and also the Vice Speaker, Senator Tina Rose Munoz-Barnes, Senator Tony Ada, and Senator Joanne Brown. General rules for this public hearing. Those testifying on behalf of Bill 55-36 COR relative to the Department of Revenue and Tax are invited to the panel. And we have today Ms. Daphne Shimizu, the Director, Mr. Frank Leon-Guerrero, the Deputy Director, and Carl Davis, right? The ASO, Administrative Service Officer. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimonies may be read, and the lengthy testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. But Ms. Shimizu, you have all afternoon if you need it, okay? But you don't have to use it, okay? Maybe an hour or so will work. Those testifying will be allowed to present oral testimony. Once you're done, please remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by members of this committee. Question and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda, which is the budget of revenue and tax for FY2022. Personal inference as to the character or the motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the budget hearing room. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and may be asked to leave or be escorted and removed from the room. I'd like to recognize that also the Speaker, Speaker Therese Terlayo, has also joined us. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name and your title for the record. After you've identified yourself, Ms. Shimizu and Mr. Leon-Guerrero and Carl, you identify yourself one time after you're asked a question or you're giving an answer. After that, we won't need you to identify yourself each time you speak, okay? At this time, I ask the panel members, the three of you, to please rise, and the Sergeant Arms will swear you in.
Kindly raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, you all affirm that any and all information that you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Mr. Chair, they're all under oath. You may proceed.
Thank you very much. Ms. Daphne, I would ask you to please present your FY2022 budget. I know you have several slides you'd like to present. You can now begin, ma'am.
Hafiday, Senator Agustin, and thank you so much for this opportunity. Also, thank you as well to the Speaker Terlahi, Vice Speaker Munoz-Barnes, Senator Brown, of course our Oversight Chair, Senator Sabina Perez, and Senator Ada for being here today. We do have a presentation, and so I'm going to just request for the Legislative AV team. Thank you so much for putting it up. Today I have with me Deputy Director Frank Leon-Guerrero and Ms. Irish Davis, who is our ASO. If you'll please move to the next slide. So today we'll be going through a few items, our mission statement, our goals and objectives. We'll be doing just an overview of our budget. We're talking a little bit about some of the accomplishments of our agency, and then what we're looking forward to in FY2022. Next slide, please. So our mission is to apply and enforce licensing laws with integrity and fairness, and to encourage voluntary compliance by educating customers to enhance and maintain public confidence. Of course, you can find our enabling legislation in 11 GCA, Section 1103, and that is, of course, Rev and Tax is set out to enforce and collect, and those are our main objectives and as per the law. Our goals and objectives that we have listed are to increase our enforcement efforts to establish and maintain public confidence in both the local internal revenue tax system as they apply to Guam, to increase taxpayer awareness of tax laws and reporting responsibilities in achieving a high degree of voluntary compliance, to regulate holders of licenses for the protection of the consumers of Guam, to improve e-commerce services as it pertains to the timely filing and submission of applications, tax documents, and businesses or forms. Next slide, please. To increase the expertise of staff and maximize capability to support department-wide programs and serve taxpayers, to provide quality services in a cost-effective and timely manner, to enhance and improve systems and processes to reduce customer wait times and lines, to maintain support and assistance to DRT regulatory boards and commissions to fulfill our mandates. And if you'll please move to the next slide. Here you'll see all of the active boards that DRT, that fall currently under DRT. We have the ABC Board, the Board of Equalization, the Real Estate Board, the Banking and Insurance Board, and the Cannabis Control Board. Next slide, please. So just kind of a general overview. This year for FY2022, we are requesting for $12.2 million, and that's an increase of $487,601 when we compare with what was appropriated for FY2021. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see just kind of where we've been over the last couple of years. In FY 2020, our actual expenditures and encumbrances were $11.8 million. The authorized level that we were approved for FY 2021 was just a little bit over $11.75 million. And then for FY 2022, in the executive budget request, that is for $12.2 million. So if you'll move to the next slide, please. So this just basically provides an overview of what we're asking for by category. The majority of the monies that we're requesting for are for personnel, and that's about $7.7 million. The next highest category is for contractual, and that's generally for our IT services and other contracts that we have. Of course, behind that we have our building rent, which is a little bit over, just shy of $1.4 million. And then our supplies, $380,000. Utilities, which is really for our telephone services, is about $100,000. And then, of course, we have $13,900. That's for mileage reimbursement, and about $6,000 for other items. And if you'll please move to the next slide. This slide basically shows the breakdown between personnel and operations. So you have, kind of a vision of what it looks like. And so, again, this is basically just recapping our budget from FY 2020 to FY 2022, but showing the breakdown between operations and personnel. Next slide, please. This slide shows the breakdown of our funding by general fund and by the special funds. So for FY 2022, we're requesting for just shy of $9.5 million in general fund monies and $2.775 in special funds. And the majority of our monies comes from the general fund. Next slide, please. So just to further break that down into the special fund categories, we do have the Banking, Insurance, and Enforcement Fund, which makes up about $478,000. For FY 2022, we have the Tax Collection Enhancement Fund. This is the funds that we receive from passport services, and that's about $837,000. And then we have the Better Public Service Fund, which is just shy of $1.5 million. If we go to the next slide. So this particular chart is provided with our, of course, with our as part of the executive budget request that we submit. It just kind of shows the breakdown of, what rev and tax is made out of and the different divisions that we have. And just want to highlight that we do have 5 main divisions. That's a tax enforcement division, and under tax enforcement we have criminal investigation, tax examination, and tax collection. taxpayer services, which is made up of income tax and processing, EDP, BPT, tax accounting, and central files. We have our real property tax division made of the tax appraisal and tax assessment branches. We also have our motor vehicle division, which is made up of the driver's license branch, vehicle registration branch, and the motor carrier safety assistance or MICSAP program branch. And our regulatory divisions, which are insurance, securities, banking, and real estate, general licensing and regulation, compliance and weights and measures. Next slide, please. So we wanted to talk a little bit about some things that have happened over the last year in particular that Rev and Tax has been part of. Of course, we have had 3 rounds of EIP so far. For EIP 1, we had paid out and processed about $151.6 million. For EIP 2, which we had finished paying out just this past March 19, a total of $79.2 million was paid out. And for EIP 3, which this information is just as of June 17, which is our most recent check run, we've already processed about $212.2 million. Some things as well we wanted to share was that in January, we began to make payments by direct deposit for refunds. That's something that has never been done before. Also, we've been working, of course, to try to keep our refund processing, to get our refund processing done as quickly as possible. We are currently below 90 days. At one point, we actually were within 30 days, and our team is actually working. We continue to work 6 days a week so that way we can get payments out for refunds as quickly as we can. Other things that we have done this year is we did also work to develop an online refund lookup portal so that you can check the status of your refund online at any time, 24 hours a day. We also did the same thing with EIPs 1, 2, and 3. This past year, as part of our efforts to, of course, address the issue of COVID, we opened up a drive-through service for income tax filing, and we believe that that was hugely successful. We actually, on the first day that we began receiving tax returns, which was Feb 12, we received over 10,000 returns on that single day, and that was probably the single highest number of returns that we've ever received in a single day. We also were able to use CARES Act funding this past year, and of course, we're grateful to the legislature because in the last fiscal year, the body did approve for us to purchase 80 workstations. We were able to use CARES Act monies to purchase an additional 80. In addition to that, we were able to purchase some scanners and laptops. And so, we're continuing to work to make sure that we modernize and we get our team the equipment that we need. If you'll move to the next slide, please. In the regulatory area, our team actually, and the compliance team, was front line when it came to the enforcement of the executive orders relating to essential businesses. So even though in 2020, in March 16, of course, the government had shut down because of COVID, our team was actually activated on March 18, and we were working throughout the public health emergency to make sure that there was compliance with the executive orders. Also, something that we wanted to note is the Deputy Director has continued to work on his efforts to make sure that the cigarette stamp taxes are enforced. As we know, that's something that has been hugely important to the legislative body. If you'll move to the next slide, please. In the area of vehicle registration, in this last year, we did, to assist with ensuring that the port was not backlogged with vehicles, we did work with Customs and Quarantine to make sure that we had outlets for the issuance of permits for the ported vehicles. We allowed for mail-in and drop-box services for disabled placards. We also worked to encourage the use of online renewals of registrations, and we believe that that has been hugely successful. Historically, I think that in 2019 fiscal year, we saw less than 9,000 vehicle registrations done online. And in fiscal year 2020, where we only had about 6 months in COVID, we had already over 26,000 vehicle registrations done online. So I think that that's been hugely successful. Also, what we did was in this past April, our vehicle registration branch moved to the DPW compound. And that was in an effort to ensure that we're able to do vehicle registration 5 days a week and also driver's license 5 days a week. If you'll move to the next slide, please. With regards to driver's license, we actually developed a mail service for driver's license, driving permits, and Guam IDs, and this is something that actually we had not ever done for on-island driver's license and Guam IDs, and so this is something that we did for the very first time. Next slide, please. We did this as well with our business license branch, where historically you would have to come into the business license branch to obtain a carbon copy form if you were going to get a new business license. We created a new form. We put it online. It can be filled it's a fillable PDF form, and that form can actually be dropped by mail or in our Dropbox so that we can issue you a new business license. And again, that was something that we did back in September 2020. And if you'll move to the last slide. And so we just wanted to share for FY2022 where we're headed. Of course, something that's been hugely important to us is to make sure that we continue to serve our people the best we can. Of course, we have very high call volumes, and we thank the governor and lieutenant governor for their support with this. We were able to hire some people so that we can have a dedicated customer service center, or a customer call center. That's something that's ongoing. We just have our new supervisor for that group. She just started today, and we're excited to have that. We actually have an area that's right behind where vehicle registration used to be, where our IT people have set up kiosks so that, or computer workstations, so that we actually have a real customer service center or customer call center. And again, that's very exciting for us. Of course, for FY2022, we hope to continue our modernization efforts and to make sure that we're adapting to the new normal, and that we work to continue to develop resilience in our organization to address situations like we saw in this last year with COVID. We're also excited that we're slated to launch in September 2021 the driver's license system, where you'll be able to renew and replace your Guam driver's licenses online. And so that's something that's just months away. Our team has weekly meetings with the IT team that is involved with that. And so that's something that we're very excited about and excited to launch. So that's hopefully going to help reduce the lines that we see. The great thing about this particular system, and of course we still don't have the final rules for it, but is that at this point it looks like you'll also be able to do renewals and replacements of real ID compliant IDs. So not an initial issuance, but a replacement or renewal. And so, for those individuals who already have a real ID compliant ID, they'll be able to go ahead and get online as long as they meet all the requirements and be able to get a renewal or replacement online. In 2019, as you're aware, we did begin to refer cases to the OAG for injunction. This is something, again, that we're beginning to start an effort on as well. As we're coming out of COVID, of course, as we work with our taxpayers on compliance, we also recognize the need to refer cases so that we can continue our collection efforts. And some things that we're really excited about as well, as you know, back in 2019, for the first time, I think, in 6 years, our collections branch was able to get some training from the IRS, where we actually physically had people here on Guam for 3 weeks training our team. We've been working with the State Clearinghouse to try to obtain some funding for training for our collections branch. And so we'll get advanced training for collections this time, and we're hopeful that we'll also be able to get training for our audit and examination branch. And again, that's hugely exciting as we work to increase the technical competency of our team, and of course, make sure that we are staying on top of trends in collections and also in audit, so we can continue to collect taxes as we need, but also, again, to make sure that our team is trained and understands the law. And with that, next slide. Just wanted to again say Sutuas Ma'asi to you, Senator San Agustin, for allowing us to come here before you today to talk about Revenue Tax's budgetary needs, and we're open for any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Ms. Shimizu. That is a mouthful. Thank you for the presentation. Are you aware of the resolution, or even the letter first to start, and then it became a resolution that this body is pursuing to assist and ask the governor to give you $10 million in American Rescue Plan?
Yes, and so with regards to the ARP Act funding, of course, as you know, we've been working with the governor and BBMR and DOA with regards to, I guess, our recommendations on how, if there's going to be funding that's going to come to rev and tax, how we would hope to be able to utilize that money.
Okay, I'm just hoping that while you're working with the administration on getting ARP funds, I'm hoping that they'll lean to no less than $10 million that this body's asked, the 36 Guam legislature is asking. Moving along, I have several questions I want to ask you before I ask my colleagues in the oversight chair to ask you. You've already talked about a lot of your CARES funding and so forth, so I'm going to skip the CARES issue, but I'm more concerned with how are the collections efforts at this point with the department? How are you guys coming along? Because you mentioned in 2019 is when you finally got IRS training for collection branch. They haven't done it for 6 years. It's amazing because that would be about 4 years ago. This body passed $1.4 million to help stand up the collection efforts, and it didn't happen. Nothing happened other than they hired, I guess, 10 or 20 collection officers, but training and everything else didn't happen. So I'm just concerned, are the collections efforts, are they bearing you some good results since you had the training for your folks?
Well, what I can say is that, when we did have our collections training back in 2019, when we were able to really dedicate, of course, our team members, then they were actually with 2 IRS trainers for 3 weeks, and the IRS trainers were very seasoned. They were like, I think between the two of them, both of them at least had, I think, 20 years of experience in the IRS, and so one that was really hugely helpful. Some of our team members, they had actually grown from, a 1 to a 2 to a 3 without even the proper training, without even any training. And so I think, number one, it was great to be able to have the training. 2, they were able to really, have an understanding of what resources are there, so that way they, know where to look for. Again, a lot of the training becomes on the job trainings. To have actual training where you're able to review books and to look at the manuals and to look at the code and to have somebody, give you that knowledge, it's very helpful. In 2019, just to share, we did have the training in the last part of the year. At that time, I know the federal contractor program is an issue that also has been brought. I know Vice Speaker Mooney Barnes did write a letter to the public auditor. We did have a meeting with the public auditor a couple weeks ago now. I'm not sure, I don't think it was last week, but we had a meeting with him a week or 2 ago regarding the federal contractor program and the performance audit that he's going to be undertaking. Something that I did share with the public auditor is that in 2019, we did, of course, in addition to the collection efforts, the injunction, the referral of cases for injunction to the AG's office, which, I had mentioned to him, there was a news article a while ago, which referred to the cases that were referred for injunction or referred for collection to the AG's office. I think of the 3 agencies that had referred, Rev and Tax had the fewest number of cases that were referred, but they had the highest dollar amount of collections. And so I think, that also says something about our collections and our efforts to collect. Back in 2019, we did, and I mentioned this to Public Auditor Cruz, we did actually send out notices to potential contractors for collections back in 2019. That was an effort that we started back then at the end of the year. Of course, in 2020, our priorities changed somewhat, but when we came into 2021, we did actually, and I believe I mentioned this at the SES, we actually opened up communications with NAFAC. Our team actually went back and reviewed the OAG audit from 2014 to, again, look at what were the findings back in the 2014 audit. And I did share with Public Auditor Cruz that I'm very happy that of the 3 findings that were in the OIG audit, I think that our team has definitely, made significant improvements. And I think even in this year, in 2021, when we went Well, we began our efforts again to review the federal contractor program. This was months ago, probably, and of course we have several collection initiatives. I'm sorry, just to share, we have several collection initiatives that we do try to work on. Some of them do require overtime. We're grateful, of course, BBMR and the governor's office has supported us in this effort. Our team actually has begun overtime so that we can take on some industry audits. And I believe that, again, in the area of collections, that our team has been pretty successful. I mean, of course, it's not to say that there aren't, areas that we could improve, but it does take time. But I think in the time that we have, begun our efforts that, we have seen, I remember back in 2019, when we first began to work with the AG's office, we would get a lot of calls from taxpayers who were very worried about us sending them or referring them. And something that I want to share, and which we share often with our taxpayers, is if you do have a tax issue, we're here to help. Yes, we're mandated to collect and enforce, but of course, a lot of that is compliance. And as you saw in our first slide, voluntary compliance and encouraging voluntary compliance is important. But yes, Senator San Agustin, I believe that our team has been successful. I can't say that I can assign a dollar figure to that, but I'm very proud of the efforts that they've made. I think that if you look back in 2019 when we just started, we actually didn't have an actual process for referring cases to the AG's office. We created a process to refer cases to the AG's office. We created forms so that we can transmit those cases to the AG's office, and those didn't exist prior to us working on them. And again, we continue to do our best to collect. As I mentioned to Public Auditor Cruz, it's our job, and that is something that we take very seriously.
Okay. No, I understand where you're coming from, Ms. Sims. So remember, I'm a former employee of Revenue and Tax. You're on a clock. And a lot of the people of Guam don't understand that when you get training today for collections or auditors or anything, it's almost 12 months before you can see a product. You can't bet on it happening overnight. I know that for a fact. Even if you're a CPA, you can throw all your credentials, revenue and tax. When you're dealing with the tax system, it's a different world. So I agree with you. I just wanted to know how you're coming along from 2019, because now we're at 2021, and I'm just hoping for the best for the department, because you got your hands full. You're the only department I know that brings in over 90% of our revenue. If it wasn't for your department, a lot of us won't have a job, or we won't get paid. Let me put it that way. Now, on another issue, are you getting any luck getting a tax attorney hired? Maybe trying to not steal, but convince somebody from IRS that's an attorney that can work for Guam? Have you been lucky enough to get one, or no luck so far?
We have, over the last few years, tried to hire. We've met with people who have seemed promising. In fact, we've had people who've been very promising and who we've waited for a few months, and of course, continue to try to encourage to come to Rev and Tax. But of course, we have not been successful at this time, and but we have been working with the Office of the Attorney General. I am happy to say that we have good relationship with the AG's office. They are responsive to us when we do reach out to them. We do understand that they do have other agencies that they do work with, but the AG himself and, of course, the CDAG have been available even on the weekends when we've had, urgent matters to inquire with them on. So, but we have not been successful at hiring an attorney.
All right. Could it be the funding, the salary that's being offered to them? Maybe could be a deciding factor, because I know in the past that has been the issue. Nobody wants to work for Revenue and Tax if you're going to offer them the salary that's being offered to them today. Has that ever come up?
It's highly possible, because really it's $150,000 inclusive of benefits, which really means that your salary is going to be like $102,000 or $100,000. So it makes it a little challenging. Yes, but
okay. I'll work that with your oversight, and we'll figure out how we can help you out. Another one is, do you have an estimated projection of how much you might collect in 2022? Collections wise? For some of my colleagues and maybe the people of Guam, 2 years ago, everybody was talking about the Department of Revenue and Taxation. There's over $200 million that is owed to the people of Guam. A lot of them didn't understand that back then, we also allowed a tax amnesty. When you issue a tax amnesty, when you collect $1, you give up $1. So when we collected back then $30 million, we gave up $30 million, and those numbers all fell under the abatement program. The abatement is talking about 10 years of collection. Now, that 200 million back then, 3 years ago, is actually went down to 140, could be even as less as 120. Now today, I'm just concerned is that with what you have on your plate, do you have an estimate or rough estimate of how much you might be able to collect before they disappear or they fall under all the reasons why you can't collect from that group? Do you know, you have a rough estimate? Maybe 100 million or $50 million you could collect from that group?
I don't have a rough estimate, Senator Snogstein,
Okay.
on that.
Well, if you can get your tax enforcement or your taxpayer guy to work on it, because he should have a number. He should be able to be coming up with a number. What's the status of the cigarette tax stamp law that was passed? I've been talking to the Attorney General's office. I'm hearing there's movement. Could you please tell us a little bit about it, where we're at and how far? Maybe Frank can discuss that. We're talking about the cigarette tax stamp. Where are we at right now? With the AG's office, whatever's going on with the cigarette tax stamp. Where are we at right now, Frank?
The cigarette, let me introduce myself.
Yes,
Frank
please.
Leon Guerrero, Deputy Director. The cigarette tap, on the existing law, we have, GSA has moved one portion of the cigarette stamp production. So that bid would have been awarded last Friday, the 18th. I haven't heard any word of who was the lowest bidder for the production of the stamp. The other phase of it, which is the services for affixing the tax stamp or an outsourcing with the Revenue and Taxation, is now in the hands of the office, the Attorney General's office. So we're just waiting for their review, and that should be out, from my understanding, relatively soon. It's just going through the fine thing. We've given them, actually, we are now in the 4th evolution of that review. So we're being very careful of the statements, the requests, the things that are associated with affixing the stamp. So that's where the
All right,
the
thank
stamps
you. Ms. Shimizu, with the automation and the online services, I'd like to congratulate you first, number one. I know that the registration portion online is a great service. I get online within the 15 minutes. I can already print my registration. The payment of real property tax, I don't know if I think it's you guys also, because we got to establish the account, run the account number, done. I'm actually looking forward to just about everything else you guys are doing online. It's a great service. The people of Guam's got to get into it. Got to get involved, do your registration. All you wait is a couple, I think it's 3 days only. You get your sticker for your registration in the mail. Real property tax done the same within the same 15, 20 minutes.
Yes, it depends, but yes, I've heard of it. I've heard of people receiving it well within 1 week. So again,
Yeah.
It just depends. But yes, you could get your registration tags in the mail.
You guys are doing
As
a
of today,
great
just
job.
to provide you an update, Senator Snogstein, in terms of the Forms 1040 filed online, as of today, we have just shy of 5,900 Forms 1040 filed online. That's the highest in number of 1040s we've ever had filed online since we first began this in 2005. And so, we're continuing to work to try to open up more items so that people can file more online in the future. Of course, we have 80,000 tax filings in terms of Forms 1040. So the more people that we can get to file online, the better for us all around, right? Because the quicker it will be to process a refund, because we won't have to manually file them. We won't have to have papers. So
Yes.
that's something that we are working on.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Shimizu, because on your slide, you identified possibly everybody will start receiving now their refund through, I guess, the automatic transfer of funds, ATF.
Where we're seeing, right, and in fact, depending, sometimes we see like 10 to 12% of a refund run be paid by direct deposit. So, you know, we're actually seeing people avail of the direct deposit option for payment of refunds, and we're continuing to encourage people. It is working, and you can get your payments for refunds by an EIP by direct deposit. So we're seeing that.
Can we anticipate that as a result of all the automation and the online service, a reduction in overtime, or, I mean, in the near future? Would we be seeing that, or is there, and the only reason I'm concerned about is the cost savings. We're going online, doing a lot of automation. Will we be seeing a reduction in, I mean, some cost savings?
You know, I think that with regards to the processing of returns, again, we're at like just shy of 5,900 out of 80,000 returns that have that get processed in a year for, that's just income tax, that's Forms 1040. So we're still a ways away from, you know, getting to the halfway point or more. We're hopeful that in this year, if we continue to expand what's able to be filed online, that we'll have more people be able to file online. And also something that we're planning as well is to work on outreach. So we work with our tax preparers, our CPAs, to make sure that they're aware and that they, you know, also kind of help us to promote the online filing option.
Okay.
But in terms of overtime, at this point, we still are in need of overtime for processing, as I mentioned. We do have many of our team members that have been working 6 days a week to make sure that we stay on top of processing of refunds. As of May 2021, I believe we paid about $69 million in current year refunds. That is 55 million more than we paid as of May 2020. So, you know, of course, between us processing and then working with DOA to make sure that there's funding, you know, I think we've been able to get out refunds a lot more quickly.
All right, thank you very much. I was going to ask you that next, but you answered that. Thank you very much. Does your department have any outstanding obligation, personnel action? Anybody owed money? Because I know there's some folks that are retired already and they're still hoping to get their pay so they can get it fixed with their retirement and all that stuff. How are you doing on outstanding obligations?
We do have a couple of outstanding obligations, one for which we had a CIC hearing just a few weeks ago. And so that's something that both we're actively working on resolving those items.
Okay, so I'm hoping Ms. Davis has got her hands full on obligations, okay? So please follow up on that. You have several people, I mean, that are owed money. I know that for a fact. You have any capital outlay projects?
Probably the largest project that we have that's ongoing is really the launching of our driver's license online at this point for this fiscal year. And as I mentioned, it's going to be completed or slated to complete or launch September 2021. And that was actually paid for by CARES Act monies. So those monies were general fund monies wasn't used for that project.
All right. One real easy one. You spent about $1.4 million on rent. Is there any consideration? I mean, I'm going to look for one for you to move out. I'm not about moving out of the building, but getting your own building. $1.4 million is a lot of money. You've been there for at least over 10 years. I know that. Not you, but the department has.
Yeah. Right.
I left there 6 years ago, and I was there since the day they first opened up.
Yes, and we've actually been engaging very actively in discussions with the governor's office with regards to identifying a permanent place for rev and tax to be that is, you know, going to be a government-owned property. So those options are being looked at, and that's something that we're actively discussing right now.
All right, I'm going to ask now the oversight chair before I ask the speaker and the vice speaker to ask questions, if she has any questions or comments for you. Because I know I asked a bunch of questions right now, and I'll wrap it up at the end. Thank you. Senator Sabina Barris.
This is Masi, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, Director Shimizu, Deputy Director Leon Guerrero, and Ms. Irish. Thank you for all your hard work. I know you've been overwhelmed this past year, And your hard work has not gone unnoticed. And thank you to all the staff from Department of Revenue and Taxation. I know it's so important, especially during budget time, to get the resources that you need. And I know this has been a long-term issue as far as, anywhere from the staff. I think, definitely you need an increase in staffing, considering the amount of mandates that these past two legislatures have created for you. And then also the IT, I know it's good to see that there's such improvement in regards to increasing the IT infrastructure. That's really important to help streamline the process of government. And so there is a grant from Bureau of Statistics and Plans in which they're supposed to deliver within 6 months' time, which is, I believe, in September. They're supposed to do an IT needs assessment that includes the following: financial management, and this is for Government of Guam, and I think this very much includes DRT, budget, human resources, procurement, taxation, land management, licensing, motor vehicles. So have you been, I guess this is very critical, and considering the budget will have already been developed after the deliverables come out, and they're supposed to come up with a strategic plan. With this budget, what do you envision this budget should contain in order to kind of maybe address some of these shortfalls? Do you have an idea so far as, do you have any preliminary information that maybe perhaps, should we find the money that we can, it'll be a good investment into DRT and to address these long-term concerns?
Okay, so first to address the issue of the BSP's engagement with the vendor to do an assessment. Tax has been part of those meetings, of course, as part of making sure that there is a good assessment that's done. So we've been working with BSP and Ernst & Young on that. That's one. With regards to, I guess, a strategy for trying to move toward modernizing Tax, some things that we've talked about internally, Senator Perez, are, I think, number one, because again, income tax is a huge issue, and of course we do have a high volume of returns that we do receive. It's really for us to try to, again, continue to expand what's allowed to be filed online. We believe, of course, we're hopeful that we'll, reach, we were hoping to reach about 10,000 returns filed online or more. We're still short of 6,000, but, again, I think the average prior to this year was 1,300. So, we're 5 times more than probably any other year outside of COVID. So we're really excited about that. But if we can get to the point that we can allow for more Forms 1040 to be filed online, which would require for us to open up, again, to allow for different types of credits, and other types of tax situations that are a little bit more complicated than we currently do. I think that's one huge item that will be helpful. Some area, of course, that's been an area of concern, I know even that Speaker Terlahi has talked about before, was, of course, our driver's license lines. We did have a satellite office at one point at Aga'hågan Shopping Center. We no longer have that, but I believe that our driver's license online system, where you're going to be able to get your driver's licenses renewed and replaced online, is going to be hugely significant as well. There are some things in the area of licensing that we're working on. Right now, the Licensing and Permit Center is working on an initiative to get online an online application for business licenses. That's something that's huge. Tax is also part of the task force not the task force, but the agency groups that's part of that. And so we're working on that as well. And that's going to be hugely helpful. I think long term, not just the business license itself, the normal business license, but also other licenses, because we do other licenses for ABC. We do licensing in insurance, securities, banking, and real estate. Those are all areas, that we hope to begin to expand so that people don't have to don't have to physically come in. I guess the main goal is, as I mentioned to Senator San Agustin earlier, and our team has really looked at the use of the renewal of vehicle registration as kind of a vision of where we want to show us a vision of where we want to go. To go from less than 9,000 vehicle registrations being done online in fiscal year 2019 to over 26,000 in fiscal year 2020. Right, that's more than twice. more than double. I haven't checked recently, but as of January 2021, we had already exceeded I think we had already exceeded 26,000 vehicle registrations done online, and at that point, 75% of our vehicle registrations were being done online. So the move to that in all of our areas is really something that we're looking at. We do have many branches, though. We have about 20 branches, so these types of efforts take a lot of focus, and you know, I do get personally involved in a lot of the efforts because, again, like for example, we do have meetings, standing weekly meetings with our IT vendor for driver's license, and I'm actively involved in that. And a lot of the reason why is because when there has to be a decision that's made like on the spot, sometimes, especially because of the time crunch now with the programmers, where there has to be a decision that's made right there on the spot, it's important that there's a decision maker that's involved. So I get actively involved in discussions. But again, just kind of, I think that we're seeing what we saw with the online vehicle registration is kind of what we want to see and expand on as an idea for other services, so that again we reduce the amount of face-to-face contact or in-person contact, and we are able to get people to do things more online.
Thank you. Thank you for that response. So the other thing is staffing. So in the budget, there are certain positions that are vacant, unfunded. And so my understanding is that if it hasn't been filled past one budget cycle, then it gets tagged as that. Maybe perhaps what is the reason for these positions not being filled in a timely manner before the position becomes unfunded?
So I know that in this fiscal year 2022 budget, we have quite more vacant unfunded positions than we did in FY2021. Something that, of course, Ms. Davis has, as she's come in, she's just started a few months ago with us, and so one of the items that she's working on is to make sure that we open up all the positions that we've had vacant, so that we can go ahead and work to fill them. So, her job is to identify those, make sure that we open them, and so that we can work to, go through the process of hiring to fill those positions.
Okay, so in looking at the budget that was submitted, does it include, maybe Ms. Irish, if I can ask you this question, have you had a chance to look at all the positions that was submitted in the budget?
Yes, thank you, Senator Perez. Yes, as I was able to look at the open positions in the current staffing that was sent out.
Okay, and so a lot of these unfunded positions don't have a salary to that. And so, because this is going to be the budget for the year, is this sufficient for the amount of work that you anticipate? Maybe Director can also.
Sure, I can chime in. One thing that I want to share, something that we did in this particular budget cycle that I think hadn't been done in probably the previous ones, was we really worked to refine the staffing pattern to make sure that every single position tied with what was exactly in the AS400 system, so that we really cleaned it up. And so with regards to just kind of the staffing pattern, I feel really good that the staffing pattern reflects, of course, what reflects the position count that we have. I know that there were some vacant unfunded positions. Of course, Senator Perez, if there's a need to hire and those positions are not funded in our budget, then we're going to have to find areas to use or to find funding for those areas.
Okay, so are you thinking about submitting a supplemental budget? Are you looking to get funding from the general fund for these positions?
So we do have several sources of funding. Something that I am likely going to, and I've discussed or I've provided information to BBMR on already, is there is language in the budget, if you look at Public Law 3599, which refers to the ACTC reimbursement that we receive. 90% of that, of course, goes into the, I think, the income tax refund account. Then 10% of those monies get put into revenue taxes, or revenue taxes allowed to utilize that money. That funding actually does fund certain positions. Because of the ARP Act, there is going to be an adjustment, I think, to the ACTC, and that we may see a reduction in the ACTC that we pay out. As a result, of course, the 10% that is going to be paid to revenue tax is going to be reduced. What I am going to be asking is that because the CTC, or the child tax credit, which is the refundable portion, which has always been paid out by revenue tax, but has not been reimbursed by the IRS before, the Treasury before, that I'm going to be requesting that, because we may see the reduction in the ACTC, that perhaps some of the monies that maybe we may see a reduction in the ACTC may be reimbursed instead from the child tax credit. And again, I know it's a little confusing, but there's the child tax credit, and then there's the additional child tax credit. The child tax credit just was authorized to be reimbursed to Guam through the ARP Act, just beginning 2021 tax year. That's for the child tax credit. The ACTC, or the additional child tax credit, we've been receiving reimbursements for. That's provided about $1.5 million to revenue tax. And again, we're expecting, because of the change in the law to the characterization of the child tax credit, we're expecting the ACTC will be reduced. So again, we're hopeful that we can get some funding from that regular child tax credit to offset that. And perhaps if we see that that's a little bit higher than how much, because historically, Senator Perez, the regular child tax credit payments that we've made are about $30 million, $27 to $30 million. So, and then the ACTC that we pay out is about 15 to 18 million. So that's why revenue tax is able to get about 1.5 million. But of course, if we are now going to be able to receive the reimbursement for the 30 million, and then we see that the amount we pay out for the ACTC drops, then perhaps some of the 30 million, and I'm not proposing 10%, but some of it can help to augment what we may end up getting reduced from on the ACTC side.
Okay, thank you. So is that 30 million just a one-time amount? It's a recurring amount?
The ARP Act authorizes it to be going forward, to be paid going forward. So it's not a one-time payment to Guam. Also, for this year, we expect, because they changed the characterization of the child tax credit, so we should see it be very significantly higher in this particular tax year than we've seen it before. So it will be higher than 30 million, significantly higher. We're expecting it to be very much higher than 30 million. But again, we've never received that before, and it is permanent. It is not a one-time payment.
Okay. Do you have an estimate of how many employees are needed to carry out all the mandates that you have currently?
Well, I can, perhaps we don't have it right now, but what we can do is utilize our overtime plan as a basis, because it could give us hours, and those hours we can equate to FTEs or to even either part-time or full-time employees. But we do have our overtime plans that we submit, and we can translate those into a head count.
Okay. Yeah, because, there's also the All Rise, the cannabis, able, achieving a better life experience. There's all these other mandates, and the tobacco tax, right, that haven't been yet realized. And so I guess my question is, have you, predicted how much staffing you need to carry these programs out, and whether, you just identified a funding source. So I think it's really important to kind of plan for the amount of staffing that you need to carry these programs out.
Yeah, we appreciate your comments on that, Senator Perez. And as I mentioned, if there's a specific amount, perhaps that's something we could, again, translate our overtime plan hours to actual head count. But, we definitely, our team has and not just in this year, but historically, Revenue Tax has had to, utilize overtime in order to stay on top of the processing of returns.
Okay. And so as far as the limited terms, I mean, those are the potential pool of workers that can be permanized. And I think this is one of the issues that DRT has had, is that there are many individuals that are still limited term that have not been permanized. So what is the plan to make these employees permanent or classified, since the department has invested time in training these employees, and in turn these employees have been dedicated to working in the various departments within Department of Revenue and Taxation?
Oh, and thank you for that question. And in fact, I want to just kind of take it one step further, because during this public health emergency, and of course I'm grateful to Director De La Sola, because the Department of Labor has been very instrumental in, of course, providing some work programs for our people. There is a displaced worker program. I believe there are other programs as well from ANAMCO. And so we've been able to receive some workers from these various Department of Labor programs. I think at one point maybe we had 20 or more. And so our goal is to, and some of them actually over the last couple of months, we've been able to hire as LTAs. So the goal is to be able to, of course, hire some of the Department of Labor employees that we have, of course, have them be our LTAs for now. And then in terms of looking at our whole LTA pool, as you mentioned earlier, as we open up our positions, and there are positions for them to apply for, and then they go through the competitive process for those positions, and so we can begin to fill them with actual permanent headcount.
All right, thank you. So the other questions that I have pertains to the budget that was submitted. So I was looking over the workload output and Technical Research and Appeals Bureau. So if you can explain, so the FY2020 anticipated level was $3 million. Is that dollars? I'm assuming those are amounts.
I'm sorry, Senator Perez, I don't have that in front of me.
Okay, so yeah, maybe you can provide that information, because if you look at the successive years, it's the exact same amount. So if you can verify the workload output that was provided in the budget.
Okay.
So that, yeah, so that's something that we can go talk about later. Let's see. So you don't have the total number of cases that TRAB handles annually?
I don't have that in front of me, but we can work on that. I'm providing that to you.
Okay, and then the percentage of cases that result in net change of dollars in collections?
Okay.
Okay, so the other things in the budget that was submitted was compliance.
I'm sorry, Senator Perez, I missed that.
Oh, the compliance.
And so TRAB and compliance,
I'm sorry, yeah, TRAB, CIB.
CIB. Oh,
Yeah. So in looking at the budget that was submitted, so I believe, let me just turn to the right page. Yeah, so but if you can verify these numbers, so some of the things that need clarification.
sure.
I guess, can you elaborate on the data and the digest of the workload output made by the Criminal Investigations Branch? Again, there doesn't seem to be much change from year to year.
Okay.
So how many active cases is the branch investigating? How many staff do you have currently in that branch? In the prior year, how many investigations were open and resolved? Do you have that information?
I don't have that with me, Senator Perez, I'm sorry.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we'll send
But-
you, we'll
Sure.
resend you the questions.
And what I can say, though, is that in the area of criminal investigation and in the area of tax enforcement, we did, just this past September, detail someone to be the acting tax enforcement administrator. We haven't had a tax enforcement administrator for some years, so we have an acting tax enforcement administrator. She's been very instrumental in a lot of our initiatives, including the federal contractor initiative and other collections initiatives and industry and audits that we're going to be undertaking. Our team actually, as I mentioned, began to do some overtime on the exam and CIB group, so that way we can work on various industry audits and of course enhance our collection efforts, and we're excited about that, but we can provide that information to you. We'll just have to, we're noting that now, Senator Perez.
Thank you. I heard that you've completed all 4 modules for procurement.
I only finished 3 modules. I just have 1 more module, and I'm very excited. I think that the modules are very helpful. In fact, I'm very grateful that I took the first module back in September, but I am at 3 out of 4, so 1 more to go.
Okay, congratulations. So how many of the employees at DRT have completed all 4 modules?
I think the only other person who's completed all 4 modules is the Insurance and Banking Commissioner. And then, of course, we're working to try to get the remaining of our members, at least for the people that are involved in procurement, to at least take Module 1. We've actually had some people with our agency for many years who have not taken any of the modules, so we're excited to be able to get some people to be taking the modules soon.
Okay, that is good, because in order to be compliant with the law, in order to purchase, one would have to have at least completed all 4 modules. So in the report provided by GSA, DRT had been authorized for a PO in the amount of $4.3 million in sole source procurement. GSA, to our calculations, paid out $1.9 million in purchases. Was the individual signing off on these purchases trained with all 4 modules?
So I'm not sure which procurement that is for, but I'm thinking that if it was signed, it was likely signed either by me or by the Insurance and Banking Commissioner, who was our prior deputy director. I'm not sure what period you're referring to. It could have also been signed off on by our prior chief of administration, and I'm not sure if he had taken the modules now. But he was with us for, I'd like to say, a couple of decades at least. Again, I'm not sure if he had taken the modules.
Yeah, we do have the records, and it's not those
It's
people
not-
that you mentioned.
I'm sorry.
It was not.
It was not,
it was not.
the chief of administration?
No.
Oh, okay. So again, the only other person who's taken 4 is the prior deputy director, who is now the Insurance and Banking Commissioner, and I've only taken 3. I'm hoping to finish the 4th one if they offer it this summer.
Okay. So yeah, that needs to be addressed, especially if you're purchasing millions of dollars worth of services and goods. Okay, so with this, this question is for Deputy Director Frank Leon Guerrero. So with the cigarette tax stamp program, an IFB has gone out for the machine and supplies. Has the individual signed off, which is you, received procurement training?
Could you repeat the last question?
I guess directly, have you completed all 4 modules in procurement?
No.
Okay.
No, I haven't.
Because according to documents, you are the procuring officer for the cigarette stamp program. So how does that function if you're not complying?
So, yeah, Senator Perez, I'm sorry. So, I mean, of course, I could not be the one to do the procurement for that particular item because I did not, because I recused myself. So, of course, Deputy Director Leon Guerrero, in conjunction with the AG's office, did work on that procurement, and I believe our ASO, our current ASO. So if there is a requirement that there be the 4 modules taken, then perhaps that requirement may not have been met.
So yeah, that's I think critical. If you are going to procure, there's a couple of purchases that have already occurred, and it doesn't seem like the person who involved was complying. And in addition, there's more procurements coming up. Okay, So I know this question was asked by the chair, but as far as prioritizing the building, so I know there's a lot of issues, we hear it from customers, we hear it from, staff too, that there's issues with the building in regards to, typhoon proof, that's an issue. Bathrooms is another issue. The amount of bathrooms available to the public. What is the plan for DRT to move out of the building, and how soon?
So as I mentioned earlier, we're actively discussing with the governor's office some options, in terms of a permanent place for DRT in a government-owned building. The plans are not finalized yet. We're working with land management on this matter. We're hopeful that we'll be able to get something done, but of course it does take time, A&E and planning and identifying. I believe the A&E and other things take time, but those are things that we're again working on with the land management and with the governor's office. With regards to the building itself, I know Senator Perez, during our last, we may have had an oversight, you did bring up in November, of course, at that point, we had problems with procuring the services for cleaning. We have been able to procure services. I'm happy to say that I believe that probably our current cleaning contract our cleaning service provider is probably the best one that we've had since I've been at Reventax. And so I believe that there's been a big improvement on that. In terms of providing or in terms of the the bathrooms and items, those are items that, in fact, over this last year, we've been discussing with the landlord to try to make improvements to the toilets so that they were commercial grade, so that, there are certain things that, of course, that they could do, again, to try to help with the issue of the bathrooms. Those are things that we're going to continue to work on while we're in the building. With regards to being typhoon proof, I know there were issues at one point with leaking, and our landlord has worked to try to address the leaking. I'm not sure if we continue to have leaks. I haven't heard of any lately. Something that we've done internally, which I think has been hugely important to us and critical in making sure that there's good communication with the landlord so that we have somebody monitoring, is we do have an individual who is assigned the facilities role, I guess, and so that they are the primary person or individual to communicate directly with the landlord when there is an issue. I think that's been very helpful. And of course, making sure that we have a good history on the issues that we have with the building so that we could share it with the landlord. But we're continually trying to make improvements to the current space that we have. We're hopeful that we can get out of the building. Again, I don't have an exact time frame, but the hope is, of course, that we're able to get into an actual new building, which will take time.
So basically, the translation is you won't be moving until you build a new building?
Right, so that's kind of, at least at this point, that's where we're at with that. And that's, again, the discussion that we've been having actively with the governor's office, is to try to, again, work with land management to see how we might be able to have an actual government-owned building where Reventax can be housed. That's the long-term goal.
Okay, so that could be more than 3 years, 3 years is probably the quickest time. So pretty much the decision is to stay there until a new building is built.
At this point, and of course we are on so the way that our lease works is I believe it's a 3-year with a 2-year options, 2 single-year options. So, we were revisiting our first option, which is this year, and then we'll have to revisit our next option in the next year to see where we are. But just so that way, we, I guess, invest our efforts in trying to address, where we're going to be and kind of the planning for it at this point versus us trying to move at this point when it's really a difficult time for us to move anyway. That's something, again, that we have been discussing. So the idea is that we invest our energy in this year to making sure that we can secure a space. And we're hopeful that we have a good plan for movement into a government-owned building. But I don't know that it'll be in the next year.
Yeah, I do feel
Yeah.
for your position. You are dealing with a lot. And, but yeah, I think, we all can see what the solutions are for, as far as staffing, as far as building. I think we know what the solutions are. It's just a matter of implementing them and how quickly we can implement them. I think, the fact that the building may be substandard, especially when it comes to typhoons, that just takes more work away from actually having to do the work DRT is mandated to do. So all these other activities that could be alleviated by these, implementing these decisions and solutions is critical to this in streamlining government, the process of government.
Right. I think that in terms of our, I think that we have been quite thoughtful as we've tried to determine what we're going to do in this next year. What we didn't want to do was to go ahead and move and only to have to move again at some point, because to move an agency like ours is quite difficult. Even just to move one little branch was very difficult. So we were trying to move our vehicle registration branch since last fall, and as it turned out, we moved, I think, actually April 26th, and even then it was moved twice in this year. So, to move an agency like ours is quite an endeavor. We want to make sure that we're very thoughtful in terms of making sure that we have all our ducks in a row before we kind of move. And so, in terms of a planning, and I absolutely, thank you, Senator Perez, because you have been a great advocate for our agency, and of course, making sure that you take care of our agency. So we're grateful for you and for your, your continued kind of drive for this effort. But in this year, just because we have a lot, we really do have a lot that's going on. We believe that our efforts to at least not have to rush to move out of a building by the end of the year, if we were going to try to do so, was probably the better route at this point, so we can focus our efforts on, kind of a longer term plan. And of course, that's something that was the decision that we had made, was to, again, work to focus our efforts on identifying a longer term plan rather than trying to get out of the building at this point right now. There is still a possibility that we can get out of our building in the next year, but at least by then, hopefully we'll have a more well thought out plan. At this point, we're in the mid part of the year. And again, even when we were just going to move one branch, it took us well over 6 months.
Yeah. Well, so the chair and myself are very willing to help out should you need any assistance. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Senator
Mr. Chair.
Pierce.
Thank you. I'm a former revenue and tax. I will help you. Get out of where you're at. That's $1.4 million we can save. The government should be paying somebody's mortgage, should be paying for their own house. Madam Speaker, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I thank you for your questions as well, and the Oversight Chair, very thorough questions. But Madam Director, thank you very much for your presentation, and for Deputy Director and the ASO who are here today. May I just take this moment to congratulate you. I really do think that your role since you have begun at the Department of Revenue and Taxation has really been a shining star in the government. It's really, when we ask you questions, you answer them directly, and you tell us everything you know. You've been very good about going in the media. And your notable accomplishments, I want to say, number one in my book is this refund processing within 90 days. This has been a thorn in the government for years, and you've got this processing system down almost since the start, and have not gone back. You've just been very consistent with the processing of the refund, so I want to thank you for that. Payment was, sometimes up and down, but this processing of those refunds is excellent. So I want to thank you and your staff for that. Of course, all the launching of new things that you've done, the online direct deposits, online refund, lookup portal services, your drive-through services for filing tax refund. These are, I've just heard so much from the public about those who use those services, how, That's one thing that gives them a lot of stress. When are they going to get their refund? So that they're able to look that up, I think is huge. So thank you again for that. I'm so excited about launching this in September, the Guam driver's license online renewal system. That's the biggest complaint I get right now is the lines for tax driver's licenses. You know, people were holding off for a long time, but they just can't hold off any longer. They really need their documents and in their hands. So I'm very glad that you were able to use CARES Act money for that, that you've been able to, that you're predicting September 2021. That's fantastic. All of the 2022 outlook looks good. Your notable accomplishments are excellent. There was a little bit of talk about overtime, but you didn't, I thought in the budget that you had predicted 0 in overtime, and so I was going to congratulate you on that too, but you're saying you might need a little to continue with processing tax refunds, so.
Yes, we will definitely need overtime, Speaker.
All right. And you did say that online filing of tax returns and other, required things or online registrations, that this would save you from overtime in the end, right? That's one of the goals of these online systems. And I wanted to ask you, so we had mandated that the GRTs be online, right? Mandatory. And I wanted to just ask you, have you seen any changes because of that online? For example, have you been able to audit more? Or have you seen any increase in collections because of the online, or anything that you think might be attributed to the mandatory online filing?
One, I want to say thank you to the legislature for mandating that BPT filing be online, because of course that's been a huge issue that we've been running into, where we have a huge backlog and it's very difficult to audit when our team is behind. Our team is actually working overtime in this area as well so that we can get caught up in terms of the BPT filings. So we're excited because once we do get caught up, then of course, because BPT is being filed online, we expect to not have that backlog that we've had for many, many years, not just, in just the last few years. And so that's exciting. In terms of the audit, of course, our team, once we have the backlog up, then our team can work to pull or classify the returns that are more recent so that we can audit those, so that we can collect more. And so I just want to again thank the legislature for that. But thank you also, Speaker. And if you don't mind, I just want to say thank you to my team and thank you to the legislature for your continued support. Also thank you to the governor and lieutenant governor. I get a little emotional, but because I've seen my team work 6 days a week, I've seen us work 7 days a week in this last year in 2020. We worked on Mother's Day. I had mothers working on Mother's Day with me to make sure that we had our EIP ones paid out to our people. It's been hugely important. And I believe, of course, actions speak louder than words. And I just hope that, through our actions, we've, the people of Guam recognize that they're really a number one for us. We really take our mandates and, of course, servicing our people very, very seriously. And again, I want to thank you, Speaker Terlahi, for recognizing that. And again, I want to just say, kind of give a shout out to my team, to the Rev and Tax team, who's worked really, really hard. As you mentioned, Speaker Terlahi, to be within 90 days for refunds is huge. I believe that in the last 18 years, I don't think that, at least more than that, maybe even more, but at least 18 years, I don't think we've seen a point where we have refunds paid within 90 days. At one point, it was within 30 days, and that's because of the hard work that our team has put in, and from the people who are scanning and receiving it and out there I'll tell you, try being in the drive-through. We could only do it half day because it was really, really hot. It was very, very hard for us to be out there. Sometimes we were out there, it was pouring rain. So I want to just say thank you to our entire team for just all of their hard work through this last year, but also thank you to the legislature as well for your support, but also for recognizing that the online is the way to go, and that the BPT, requiring BPT to be filed online is just kind of hopefully the first step so that we can begin to get more people to file online and use technology.
Thank you. And shout out to your team as well. I echo you. Thank you to all of them. When the chairman was talking about collections, he talked about, we started 2 years ago with a certain amount due. He said 200 million due, then we did the amnesty program, so after that, the balance was approximately 140 million due. And he had asked if looking to collect that is something that you're looking to do in 2022. Where do you predict kind of any collections outside of regular, what we're going to be predicting in our budget revenue cycle? What are you thinking might be some outside of that type of collections? Is it this outstanding from the 140? Are these still collectible?
We actually have to review our AR. I don't have an updated AR for you, Speaker Terlahi, today, but that's something that, of course, we can work on. And in terms of collections, you know what? It's not just going to be that, because those are already things that are identified. But also, my understanding is those are things that, for example, may be in court or maybe something that may be contested. So those may not be all fully collectible. Again, especially if there is a court case or court cases involved, right? So that's one. So of course, our collections efforts are not just going to be focused on those that we've already identified. In fact, part of the overtime efforts for our tax enforcement branch, which again we had just started recently, is to, we run many different types of collection initiatives. We don't always share exactly the details of it. Of course, the idea is to make sure to get the notices out to the taxpayers to make sure that they're aware that we're doing them. But we don't necessarily alert everybody every time we're doing an initiative. Again, it's just part of our collections efforts. But our team is undertaking some serious collection efforts at this time, and we can provide more information for you on that. Probably the best person to talk with is our tax enforcement supervisor, and because when she did submit her overtime budget for the collections and exam branch and CIB branch, she did provide a justification for it. But those we could provide to you, ma'am, if you like, so you could see the detail.
I guess I'd like to just hear the goal of it, right? Like, so if they were successful, how much more are they looking at collecting? They must have some kind of goal in sight. I just kind of want to hear that in general. But sure, thank you for that, for providing that information. Can I ask what happened to the 14 million that was outstanding several years ago? This was a levy, I think, in the district court on tobacco taxes. And I guess I'm a little confused because I've heard about it in the media and I want to hear it from you. What happened with that 14 million?
So with regards to any specific taxpayer's case, those are things that are, of course, protected by disclosure laws. So we can't speak on any specific taxpayer's liability. And so that's something that I'm not able to respond to you on.
Well, it was, we know about it because it was filed in court and public. So I guess, is there any public part of that? What happened in the court that you could tell us what's the outstanding?
And actually, Speaker Terlahi, I'm not aware of the public portion of it. I'm sorry, that was filed in court. So if there is some portion of it that may be public, that's something we can work to provide to you. As far as I am aware, in terms of the liabilities of our taxpayers, I'm not in particular.
All right. If you could just take a look. If there's a public part of that you can disclose, I'm asking for that. In relation to that, the RISE Act, when it was written, it required authorization, that taxpayers give authorization to the Department of Revenue and Taxation. I'm guessing that was at your recommendation?
Yes.
And is that absolutely a requirement? Can we waive that?
That's something that we believe is a requirement, and we did the same with the I Maga'hågan, which was that other local program. And the reason why that we are doing this is because, of course, it's the Organic Act that sets forth, or that has that states that we do mirror the Internal Revenue Code. Because we mirror the Internal Revenue Code, it is the Internal Revenue Code that can indicate what are the authorized purposes for us to pull taxpayer data for a program. EIP is actually in the Internal Revenue Code, right? When Congress does mandate or authorize those things, they get engulfed in the code, right? In the U.S. code. And so it's in Title 26. But the local mandates are not put into there. And so
Assisted.
that's why, with regards to the use of the actual taxpayer information, we require an explicit authorization, and we go through an application process for it.
All right, and I've heard this, for years for different reasons, but is there something you have in writing that confirms that need for an authorization for these purposes? For example, do you have an AG's opinion or something from anyone else, like some guidance from the IRS in that regard?
I can check on that.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to confirm, because if we can waive that, I would like to waive that right away. The ARP, or recent congressional action, is going to be giving reimbursements for the EITC to Guam, and I wanted to ask you, do you expect an increase in EITC claims because of the news of this reimbursement? I don't know.
The thing about EITC is we have been paying it for many years, as you know. And so already, for Guam residents, for people who qualified, they've been claiming the credit because they've been paid. They've been being paid. It was just the reimbursement. It's been an unfunded mandate. That's the part that's different. I don't know that we can expect more people because of it being reimbursed, because, again, we've been paying it.
All right. I'm wondering, I know that you've been, as part of your mandate, and just because of you as the director, have decided to continue to assist taxpayers in preparation of their returns. And I was wondering if you could do a special clinic or something to assist those who may be eligible for EITC, so that we can maximize their claims for EITC if they are eligible. I just want to make sure we're getting that everyone who's eligible is actually making that claim.
Sure, and we appreciate that, Speaker Terlahi. Take that under advisement.
All right, and we were told, I'm glad what you told us about the military contractors, how you're moving forward with, assisting in the audit and that you've improved in the findings that were made in 2014. Do you have any, and then I heard you say, I was going to ask you, how are you getting all of this online stuff done? Is it OTEC who's leading? Is it, but then I heard you mention IT vendors for certain programs, for example, the business license, the driver's license and all this. So are there pretty much vendors for each of the different programs that you're trying to put online?
Right, and so for driver's license, we have an off-island vendor called Valid. The Office of Technology, though, I do try to include them in our discussions because they're very critical. They're the technical experts.
Okay. We were told in another hearing that you were actually going to be the lead on that business license online application, that you were going to be the lead on that. And I'm very glad to hear this. This is excellent news. And so I was very happy when they told us you would be the lead on that as well. I know you said you're part of it, but so I do expect success in that as well. So I want to thank you for that. Can I ask about the tax stamp to follow up on, so the Mr. Gangor, the Deputy Director, you said that the bids were received last Friday, but you've not seen the results, but that should be then to procure the stamps themselves, that should be ready to go. The bids are received, somebody's going to be awarded, and the stamps will be available.
Yes, the GSA was supposed to, or it was announced on the media that they will be opening the bid last Friday, and it will be awarded to the lowest bidder. I haven't received any information from GSA on whether that project was completed and who was the lowest bidder. So the bidder for that one will be to produce the tax stamps.
Yes.
So, and then, okay, so they'll get the stack, they'll produce the tax stamps, and we control, so it's a printing process. We control, it comes to revenue and tax, we control the amount of stamps that are available. It's locked up, and from there, the wholesaler will come to us, we'll draw out whether it's 1 million stamps or something, make the payment. I believe it's $4 per tax stamp, so that'll be the amount, whatever they want to do. So that's that portion. Now, the other portion that we're waiting for at the Attorney General's office is kind of like the review and the control, because revenue and tax is basically outsourcing or providing that outsource of service that we probably could have done ourselves, but there was an option, and that that we could have another vendor provide that services where they'll charge it out. So again, it's drawn from it. So that's the portion that we're waiting for.
Right, okay, so they're reviewing what exactly, the RFP?
Yes, that is correct.
So you've drafted an RFP and submitted it to the AG for review?
Yes, it's at the Office of the Attorney
So
General right now.
Has the department then decided to outsource? Because I think the way the law is written, that the department has a choice whether to do it themselves and save that
Right.
14 million or 12 million, or whether to outsource it. So what does the RFP provide for? That it's going to be outsourced for sure, all of it?
Well, you have to, there's two things that are playing right here. We could retain it. We could retain the operation, but remember, it was unfunded. In other words, it's just an additional work that requires staffing. It will require people, equipment and other operations to run the thing. So the option provided by law was to outsource it to another agency so that they can do that service. My understanding is they get up to about 12% of the tax stamp.
Yeah, we were told about 14 million.
Yes.
But, so my question to you is, have you made a decision? Is there a final decision made as to whether because a prior deputy director told us that that service could be done for $300,000. And we're here in a budget hearing, so I wanted to check whether, if we gave $300,000, we're going to save the 14 million, or if you've already made a decision or something that's going the other way.
Okay, whether a decision has been made is not final, because we'd like to present it out to the public, see if there's an interested business person that will do it. We're thinking that there's going to be so much requirements that for a company to take it on, and just to make because they're going to have to buy equipment, personnel, a lot of there's so many parts of the mechanism on that. So would they be able to make enough money
From the 14 million?
from that service? Maybe. So
Okay. So, how are you going to make a decision whether to do it that way or to keep it in-house? What if your budget increases by $300,000?
I'm not sure where the $300,000 came from, but I don't see that being realistic, because there's still, if we kept it within revenue and taxation, that means we're going to have to procure the equipment, staff personnel on it, and do all the other service where I fix the stamp. So it will require basically a whole new.
All right, so do you have an estimate of those costs? Because the former deputy director gave us an estimate of $300,000. If
Okay.
I'm not mistaken, that's where I'm getting that number. She gave us an estimate. She told us they would need this many people and
Right.
that to do this, and that's why she had at that
Okay.
time supported
I'm
keeping it
not aware of that
in-house.
history, but I
Okay.
can do the research and try to come up with where
Yeah, an estimate.
that number came from.
All right, so a couple more questions. First of all, there's a $6 million surplus showing in the latest CRER that we just received today. And that's in the general fund. I just wanted to ask if you know, if you could explain that. Is that from taxes? Is that because the taxes were just paid last month? Or?
I believe that, and I don't have the CRER in front of me, but I believe that we did notice an increase in income taxes. Of course, usually the income tax deadline is April 15, so we'll see the spike in terms of income tax payments around then. We didn't necessarily see that, but we saw a spike in May. It just so happened that that spike, I believe, caused the, it looks like, of course, we had a quite significantly positive impact from the income taxes that were received from this past month of May.
And wasn't the deadline moved to May, though?
May 17,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
right.
All right. What about real property taxes? It looks like collections are down for that, and I guess I wanted to ask, are there any efforts to collect delinquent real property taxes? What is it that's causing this, not full collection of those taxes?
I would have to look at that more, but since even late last year, we've been talking about doing something that we did back in 2019, and when we did it in the end of 2019, it was the first time we did it in like 5 or 6 years, where we sent out notices. Usually first of all, when we do the delinquent listing is only for the current year delinquents, right? You're not seeing any prior year delinquents in that delinquent listing. Something that we took on in 2019 is to send out notices to those taxpayers that, for real property taxes that still had outstanding balances. We had already, our agency had been discussing this since late last year about sending notices out again for real property taxes, and that's something that we'll be undertaking, is to send out notifications as well so that we can collect on those.
All right. Thank you. Finally, I heard you talking about the child tax credit, that we're expecting more than $30 million in reimbursement for child tax credits, and that there's already a law that allocates part of the additional child tax credit for use by revenue and taxation for personnel and other things. So did I hear correctly? You're suggesting that we either amend the law or pass a new law that would allocate a portion of the reimbursed child tax credit to revenue and taxation to allow you to hire those unfunded personnel and to pay for overtime?
Madam Speaker, it's actually in the budget law or the Budget Act, and so in the Public Law 3599, it was on page 8, and so that on page 8 where it talks about the additional child tax credit reimbursements, section 6B.
So that's the additional.
Yeah. So
the additional is already in law.
Yes, the additional is already in law,
Right.
and so yes, I am actually probably recommending that maybe this portion of the CTC be provided, and only because of the, and it becomes a little bit complicated, but basically the child tax credit is broken up into two pieces. The regular child tax credit that is a non-refundable credit, and then the additional child tax credit, which is refundable. So if you don't get you can only get the regular child tax credit to the extent that you have a tax liability. So say the total child tax credit is $2,000, you have a tax liability of $1,000. You can only get the regular child tax credit up to that $1,000. Then if you still qualify, it's possible for you to get the additional child tax credit, right? And so because the child tax credit itself is now refundable as per the law, we're thinking that the additional child tax credit will be reduced.
Sure.
And the concern is that if it gets reduced significantly, then we won't be able to get the $1.5 million we usually get.
I understand. I think it's a great idea. If that money is going to be reimbursed, that you use a portion of it to continue to do the work that you're doing. When you said you're expecting higher than $30 million,
for just this first year at least, because the child tax credit was increased from $2,000 to $3,000 if you have a child who is above age age 5 who's 6 and above. And if you have a child who's below 6, then it's $3,600. So it's almost doubled. It's like 1.5 times what it currently is. So because of that, we're expecting to see that 30 million, go up at least for one time in this year. It is. I do want to share, though, Madam Speaker, that it seems on the national side that it seems that to be tracking. There's discussion that this may be permanent. But that's something that's still in discussion, and there's no law yet for that, or bill yet for that.
How much higher than 30 million are you expecting?
Even if we were to say it's 1.5 times, so say it's 1.5 times 30 times 1.5. I mean, at least that much, but we expect it to be, at least for the first year, more.
Okay, so it's already permanent that it will be reimbursed.
Yes.
But it's not yet permanent that the $3,000 amount, so that we're hoping that will also be permanent. Okay,
Yes.
I want to thank you. All right, so I want to thank you again and your team for everything, and Mr. Chair, I want to thank you for the time you've allotted me.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Vice Speaker, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Daphne, Deputy Director Leon Guerrero, and your team here for doing an excellent presentation as we look at your goals and your objectives, and more importantly, your notable accomplishments. I want to say I do have to give you credit as the only agency that receives receivables for the government of Guam. You guys have done so much more with less. So that I have to give you kudos for, and thank you guys and your team for continuing to be out there and working with the residents of Guam to make sure, from licensing to working with the boards and commissions that you have, from the Banking and Insurance, ABC, Board of Equalization, Real Estate Board, the Cannabis Control Board, to the over 25 mission mandates that you have to do with your 5 divisions. I have to say, that's a lot of work, and your presentation today was extremely excellent. I did only have a couple of questions after hearing it, but I'm going to add one after the good speaker brought up and the oversight chair again brought up about the tobacco stamp. So first, let me just go through some things that were done previously and said. In 2020, during her State of the Island address, our Maga'hågan, Governor Leon Guåhan, said the administration referred several individual tax evading cases to the Office of the Attorney General, and I think that was totaling over 5.9 million in last year alone. Can you provide any update on how many additional cases were referred since then, and have we got an accounting of how much was already recovered?
We can provide that. So to clarify, Vice Speaker, and one, thank you very much for your comments, and thank you for your support of our agency. Regarding the referral of cases to the AG's office, we only referred cases in 2019. Beyond then, we did not. We did, of course, file some documents with the court for the case for certain cases. In addition, in 2019, we did have a pretty large tax case. I believe that was maybe close to $6 million tax case at that time. So that was in addition to the referrals of cases that we did. So we had that one case that was a tax case, plus the additional cases that we referred to. And so I don't have an update on that, but that's something that we could provide. As I mentioned earlier, we're actually gearing up to begin again to refer cases. And so that's something we'll be communicating with the public, of course, about, because, even when we did refer cases in 2019, and of course when we do efforts, just like when we did the B&B efforts, if you recall back in 2019, our strategy has been to first advise, when we do those types of enforcements that we've not really done before, or that are outside of the realm, even though they may be the law, we have provided notification, at least for those efforts, and then that way, people are aware. But so before we do refer more cases to, or report cases to the AG's office, we will advise the public of our intention to do so that if people are aware that they may be on that list or may be part of that group to be referred, that they, have the option to always come in and work with us. They actually always have the option to come and work with us anyway.
And you have a separate assessment or update on how much money is coming in from that, right? That you can provide to us at a
Right,
later
and
time?
perhaps what I could do, because as I mentioned, there was a news article which talked about the number of cases we referred and how much was actually collected. So I can pull some data for you on that.
That's good. Number two is I know that the director of OFB has shared that, the chairman has shared that he's going to try every way to get you that facility and get you the resources you asked. You talked a little bit about the vacant positions. How much is it going to cost? He's asking it too. How much is it going to cost to fill all the vacant positions? Just if I had to pull that component out, what are we looking at as far as the fast numbers?
Yeah, I believe that, of course, the OFB had put together a spreadsheet on that, and that could be probably used as a resource for all those vacant fundeds, and I believe that was provided. So, in terms of unfunded vacant positions, we had 32. Funded vacant positions, we had 12, and it looked like the dollar figure for that was in the realm of $460,000. But again, I'll have to look at that further. I'm sorry.
How much is that? I'm sorry.
I'm looking at the vacant funded and the vacant unfunded. I apologize. I have to look at that. But there is a schedule that was provided by the OFB that was part of the presentation. If you could look, there's a FY2022 proposed vacant unfunded. It's 33. Vacant funded is 22. And then there's a dollar value beside it. And that dollar value says $461,391. But I would have to look at that further, ma'am.
Okay.
that seems-
$451,000 right now as it's looking, right? As the ballpark, right?
That's what it's looking at. But I need to confirm what that
Okay.
value means.
If you can, because we'll see what we can do. And then it says, recently, we talked about that Revenue Tax established that online option for income tax filing. What percentage of the tax filers have opted to file their taxes online? And with your current system, what percentage of tax filers can Revenue Tax handle online filing? So if you're talking about, I guess you said 80,000 tax filers, am I saying that right? Mm-hmm. And out of that, you're saying 59,000? I mean, how many
About
filed?
5,900. So historically, probably the average has been 1.6%. As of I'm just rounding.
Yeah, 5,900.
So now we're at 7.4%. So we went from, less than 2% to, hold on. Yep.
So, but my question is, okay, so the percentage is there. Can revenue and taxation, with the continued awareness on this online option, can you handle online filing completely?
So what we did originally when the online forms 1040 was done, it would mirrored a 1040 EZ, and that 1040 EZ, of course, you can't have any dependents. You also can't have anything other than wages, and your wages, I think, had to be less than $50,000 or $100,000. Right, and so when we were thinking of expanding the Form 1040 in this last year, we kind of thought about, okay, how can we expand it and be able to capture, the most people at this point? So we believe that based on the criteria that we're allowing for on the online, which is you can file if you make wages over $100,000. You can file if you have dependents. You can file if you have some basic credits like the child tax credit or the ACTC, right? So, and also if you had PUA or unemployment compensation, we added those. So when we looked at our history or the history of people filing, right? Because if we were to expand it all together and include every single schedule, right, it may be too much and we may not have the population for that. We believe that given the criteria that we have online, that we could probably about 50% of our population can qualify for online filing. So, of course, this year we had kind of come into, when we came into expanding the online filing for this year, perhaps there could have been more outreach. I know our team had been working on this since last summer and coming into the end of this year in preparation, in the end of 2020 calendar year in preparation for 2021. What we're hoping is that over the next several months, we'll be able to do some outreach, and I've spoken with some people in the tax preparation industry about, doing some outreach to tax preparers because, I think it's one thing to share with individuals, but because it can be a little bit complicated, for people who don't deal with taxes regularly. So we believe that the key to being able to expand further, right, really to go from 7% to 50 or 60% is going to be really working with tax preparers and doing outreach. And so that's something, I've begun to discuss with some tax preparers, some CPAs, about doing some outreach. And so that way they can offer this as a service. I mean, one thing on the non-tax side, I do want to share, Vice Speaker, like for example, for vehicle registration, it's been great to see. I know it's been a hard time for a lot of people, but we've seen some people pivot and change the way they do business. So we've seen some what are normally just safety inspection agencies expand their services and then also do registration for some of their clients. So in addition to doing the safety inspection, then they charge an additional fee so that way they can do the registration for their their clients. And so again, we're hoping that this is going to be as we work on these things, of course, we believe the key is going to be the industry experts and working with them, and that's something, we want to work to do.
Well, if there's a software that's needed or anything else, resources that is needed for pushing that, I mean, from 1.6 to 7.4 and possibly growing, and like we said, bringing the outreach, right? Mm-hmm. The awareness out there, that's going to make it even better for us, and we just want to make sure that you guys have the tools necessary to bring it out there, right? So it makes it easier for your team. So we want to continue to work on that. And then just two more. According to the budget summary, one of the goals revenue tax is improving the e-commerce options. We know that there's a strong desire in the administration to modernize the business licensing and permit process. How soon can we expect e-commerce to be a viable option for businesses in Guam? And what are the roadblocks you are facing in its implementation? And the reason why I'm bringing that up also was just recently, I had some concerns about constituents calling in also about the struggles on the permitting process and the concept of the one-stop center, and knowing that even with that concept of every agency that a business owner needs to go through is at one location, and there's been a collaboration, you literally have to go there 4, 5, or 6 times because not every agency is there between the open hours of whether it be 7 or 8 to 4 or 8 to 5, and so the frustration is still there. So my question is, what roadblocks, what other avenues we can look to seeing full implementation and a positive move on truly bringing this component up to make it, I guess, easier for all the businesses?
So regarding the business license and permit center and us moving online, that's something, of course, our agency, we've been kind of taking the lead in coordinating the agencies so we can move forward with an effort. We do, of course, still have Governor Gutierrez, who is our permit czar, and he's working on a different kind of dimension to the permits and business licensing piece. But We've been, and we did have on June 10 a broadcasted meeting where, of course, Lieutenant Governor Tenorio and then Governor Gutierrez and the Business License Task Force that was created by an executive order back in 2019. We did have that broadcasted on June 10 where we talked a little bit about just where we are. And, you know, of course, the Business License Permit Center itself, or the one-stop concept, right, which was started many years ago, the way the task force developed recommendations based on, you know, the way that the permit center exists. What we're really hoping for, of course, is, and we're working towards, is to get an online application form and an online system so that each of the agencies, the relevant agencies, can log in online and they can go ahead and do, you know, the various approvals or communications with applicants, you know, online, and that there will be, you know, not the need for people to necessarily have to come in like what we've seen. And so, you know, the way that the Business License Permit Center is set up at this point, the structure is not necessarily the way that, you know, we envision it to be once we get this to be done online. We're excited about, you know, the possibility of making sure that there's some level of transparency. So for those applicants, you know, I know a lot of the questions are, where is my application? Is it at GFD? Is it at DPW? Is it stuck at Rev and Tax? So those are the things that we're working to address. Yeah. The great thing is that the State Clearinghouse has worked to identify funding, and they've worked on writing on a TAP grant through the Department of Interior. And so there has been funding that's identified to address or for the procurement for this particular software or application that we're looking at. So, you know, there's a funding source. So now our team is just needing to work on the procurement piece so we can get this procured and make sure that it, you know, we work on it happening as soon as possible.
Yes, I really want to continue to see how we can move forward on that. And again, we need to make sure that the businesses out there, that we give them the opportunity to have a business, to start a business without having the frustration of trying to go through the process to get every clearance, every application, and it's just roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And I understand their frustration, and I understand that sometimes it's just needing of the concerted effort and then bringing that awareness, so whether it be online or whether it be the one-stop, is how do we bring it all together so those businesses, right, our businesses here in Guam have that opportunity to be at ease and not have to work through the struggles and even the complications on what is being done. Like I said, I applaud your efforts, but in knowing that the roadblocks are still there, is what can we do? If you need that software, you need that program, let us know so that we can help.
Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker.
Yeah, and then I did, you know, you guys talked about the tax refund, right? And I just want to say it again, the agency under your leadership has done a tremendous job in getting our tax refunds out within the deadline set by the court injunction. However, I know, and people still believe that within the island, they want to receive their taxes, their tax returns within a few weeks of filing, you know, similar to what happens back in the mainland, right? In the States, they file their tax returns, and if they're going to get a refund back, they get it within several weeks, right? And sometimes no more than a month at longest. So my take to you is this something the agency, your agency, is continuing to pursue? And again, what kind of resources or manpowers are needed to achieve this goal?
Sure, and one, of course, you know, Speaker Terlahi did talk a little bit about overtime. We're going to continue in FY22 to likely need overtime to continue processing. As I mentioned, we do have people who work 6 days a week so that way we could process returns. The hope is that we can hire people and not have to pay overtime so that, you know, of course, we can, you know, perhaps have increased production, and that's something that we hope for. Again, as a pathway to getting to a place where we're even below 90 days, although again, you know, I've mentioned, and then something that we're very proud of, in over 18 years, I don't know that we've ever, across the board been at 90 days or less. And I think we're hovering around 80 some days. Our team, we want to try to get down to, to get these processed as quickly as possible. That's something that we really are hoping to do. We believe the pathways, though, is going to be, done. There's going to need to be multiple efforts that's going to be needed to be undertaken. One, of course, is the continued overtime. Two is going to be the continued work toward modernization, working with, as the speaker mentioned, on outreach, as you also mentioned, on Vice Speaker, on education, to make sure that people know they can file online and that they do take or avail of that option to file online. So it's going to be working not just with educating our people, educating also the professional community so that we can work together to get these, again, so people know it's an option and that our preparers make sure that they can get those out. Because if we're able, just to share, in order, when you file a paper return, that paper return gets stamped by somebody. It gets inventoried. If there's a staple, the staples have to be taken out. It has to be scanned. Once it's scanned, of course, it gets inventoried and indexed in our system. Then we do have people who, organize, file it, make sure that we have a document locator number on that, and so that we can find it in the future if we ever need to. So there's a whole long process, and that's even before we actually begin to enter that return into the system. That is not even entering it into the system yet. So we have a whole long process that's involved. What I share with my team is, with regards to the online, and we haven't talked about this in a while, but could you imagine, and say it takes, 10 minutes, and I'm going to say 10 minutes is very, very little, but say it takes 10 minutes to process a return. Try 10 minutes times 5,900 returns. Right? That's a lot of minutes. That's a lot of hours. So we're hopeful that the continued education, the continue to move to get things done online, most especially at this point, of course, the Forms 1040, is going to help us to reduce overtime, to help us be able to do more analysis, more audit as needed, but also, and so that way we can work on collections. I know that's a huge initiative and effort for you and concern of yours, Madam Vice Speaker, but also an online return, once it's filed online, if there's no issue, otherwise, if the Social Security numbers are valid and there's no other issue for it to get flagged, it's actually in the system already, versus, again, having to go through the process of it being inventoried, stamped, stapled, unstapled, et cetera. So, we're hopeful that the move toward modernization is going to also help to continue to reduce the number of days, and so that we can get our money to our people more quickly.
I'm going to say, so the reception of automation is great there.
Absolutely.
So I promised the chair one more last question, because you did talk about the tobacco stamps. And then my question to you is, how much is revenue tax collecting in tobacco taxes right now? And how much do you think that they are not collecting? You guys are not collecting, because the audit by the OPA indicates that millions of dollars are being lost in tobacco taxes. So today, I ask you that same question as I asked previously in the past, knowing that the audits from the OPA did say that millions of dollars were escaping in the last 3 years. We're looking at what, 45?
I would have to look at the Special Revenue Fund report, ma'am, in order to be able to advise on how much we've received in the tobacco stamp, or the tobacco taxes or cigarette taxes, so I don't have that in front of me, so I couldn't say. In terms of revenue losses, I can share that our team, of course, we do go through the process of bonded. If you've ever gone and done bonded, it's quite a long process. There's a lot of manual inventorying that's done. There's a lot of course, checking to make sure that that the amount of product that's taken out of bonded, of course, is accurate, because because the trigger for the tax is going to be the pulling out of bonded, right? The trigger for the tax to be paid by the tobacco wholesalers is the pulling out of the bonded. So I can say that our team invests a lot of time and effort in making sure that, the data is accurate and correct, but I can't say in terms of, how much losses. And in fact, I apologize, because it's been a while since I've looked at that particular audit, so I can't say.
I will continue to work with Reventex and that to see how we can get the information needed so that we can facilitate this moving forward. Because, Mr. Chair, you need to know that when the introduction of this effort to try and stop the leakage and collect the taxes that were owed in the 34th Guam legislature, there was talking about public-private partnerships of up to 44% could be utilized to collect revenues that were owed to the government. In the legislation that I had authored, it was to give it from 44% to just 10 to 12% through an RFP and work that public-private partnership with that. And I'm hoping that with the answer that I heard today, that hopefully we can find a vendor sooner than later as it relates so that we can collect and have that leakage stop. So, Mr. Chair, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to ask a few questions. Senator Mossy.
Thank you. Senator Ada, do you have any questions or comments, sir? And then Senator Brown will follow you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Director, Deputy Director. So thank you for your budget presentation. I think you really went through it really well, and I'm surprised that all you're asking for in additional was like 400, I think it was 400-some thousand, right, from your last appropriation. You know, it's been a challenging year, actually year and a half for the entire government of Guam, most especially for you guys trying to keep everything going, trying to get businesses to get their business license, collecting revenues. I mean, I can't imagine what you guys have been through, and thank you for all that you do, and thank you for all what your team has done throughout this pandemic. It's one thing that we've gone through this period of crisis, and now it's how do we move forward with recovery. And I think that's where we need to be very cautious how we keep moving forward, with the revenues, and that's why it's important that you guys try to collect every single penny that is owed and due to the government that you guys can, because I know that right now we see this influx of revenues coming in, but that's the anomaly of the federal government helping the local government sustain and be able to stay alive. So now it's how is our local government going to be able to sustain itself after all the stimulus payments have been made, after all the whatever federal assistance we're getting, once all that stops, how do we continue, right? And I think that's the question that I want to ask of you is, what do you see, or how do you see collections in the future after, or even just in the next fiscal year, being able to collect revenues? I mean, once PUA stops, we don't have tourism coming in at this time. Businesses are trying to get reopened. What are you guys going to be doing to ensure that we still collect the revenues that we can to sustain the operations of this government?
Thank you so much, Senator Ada, for that question. Of course, throughout this whole public health emergency, we've been trying to be very mindful of the fact that revenue tax is very critical in helping to recover the economy in many ways, even outside collections. During the public health emergency back in September, our team on Labor Day were discussing how to begin to issue new business licenses, even during a public health emergency, even when our doors are actually closed to the public. Back in March 2020, we didn't know how long this was going to last. By the time we got if you recall, I believe we opened up May 11. We were in peak or 2. We ended up shutting down again in July, and then we knew that likely this was going to kind of be the trend for a bit. And so, again, in the area of business license, we, recognized the need to, and we saw that people wanted to open businesses during the public health emergency. Some of them, of course, having to do with rentals, people needing to make sure they had continuity of business license for rentals. So we needed to make sure we continue to do that. And we did so by allowing for the business license applications to be done by Dropbox and mail. In the area of driver's license, we saw people who like needed jobs, they needed identification. So, for the first time ever back in, I think, August, we began to do the mail service for on-island Guam driver's license renewals. So if you had a driver's license that needed to be renewed, you could do it by paper, and you could mail it to us. And if for on island, if you were on Guam, because we actually had off island or out of Guam renewals for many years. So that's something we worked to adapt our process for, so that people could have an ID, so that they could go to the bank and they could make deposits, and so they could get so they could have jobs, or for those that needed real IDs, we did our best to try to open up so that way they could, get the real IDs that they needed so that they could work on base, or for contractors that work on base, and that's outside of the collections. In the area of collections, I did mention earlier, our team actually has begun to do overtime in the area of enforcement. Now, the three areas in tax enforcement are the criminal investigation branch, our audit branch, and also our collections branch. And those are very critical, of course, to the whole collection, the whole area of collection. We're hopeful that in this fiscal year we'll already see some of the impact from our overtime and from the time that we're investing in collections efforts. As I mentioned, we're already contemplating beginning to refer cases to the AG's office, again, like we did back in 2019. This doesn't mean, and this is something that, of course, I want to share with everyone, is just because we refer a case doesn't mean that we cannot still work with a taxpayer. It only moves to the next step of actually being filed in court if if it's not possible to work with a taxpayer, and if the taxpayer is not willing to, I guess, come to the table to work with us. So there are times when the cases that we refer to, so not all the cases that we refer to the AG's office even become public, right? Again, there's still the possibility that we can pull it back if the taxpayer wishes to work with the department to try to get their account remedied. And so, again, that's one area, but also with initiatives like what we're working on with the Federal Contractor Project and other collections initiatives. And so, these industry audits, perhaps what they could be are called or referred to, are things that are actually outside of the realm of the normal kind of day-to-day that our team does. So we're hopeful that with these additional initiatives, we'll be able to collect more. We do recognize that, and thank you again for, bringing up the issue of, the fact that there is going to be a point when the federal government is not going to be providing this additional funding, and so, we recognize, though, that that we're going to have to, again, work toward getting back to some level of normalcy, and that's what we're trying to do now.
Yeah, that's great to hear, as long as that, you keep in mind that, these challenges will perhaps, show face and by the end of the year, or even perhaps before that, and, you recognize that. The only other questions I had were you guys have paid out the stimulus 1, stimulus 2. So the question was, on the RISE Act, the governor has already committed to paying out the RISE Act, but there was a stipulation there that you had to apply for it. Why can't we just do what we did with stimulus 1 and 2, where it was an automatic payout and people didn't have to apply for it?
Right, and so, okay, our tax law is actually dictated by, or is set forth by the Organic Act, which states that, of course, we're a mirror code. We mirror the Internal Revenue Code. The Internal Revenue Code is authorized, or I guess gets adjusted only by the federal government. So EIP itself, when the federal government and the president did sign into law the CARES Act, and then ARP, and then also I can't remember, CRTRA back in December. All of those are actually included in the Internal Revenue Code. Now, the Internal Revenue Code dictates what are the authorized uses for a return information. Again, because EIP is in the Internal Revenue Code, it's considered an authorized use. Outside of that, when we do audit, when we do pull information because we're auditing a return, of course, those are other reasons why we could pull. Now, the local the local legislature, of course, cannot change the Internal Revenue Code. And that is why we, of course, have take the position that it's necessary that a taxpayer explicitly does provide authorization and does in order for us to pull their tax data or utilize their tax data for this program. And again, this is something that we as well did with the Zuda I Maga'hågan, in this last year.
Oh, that's great to hear then that, and I think that explanation, you're always out on the radio explaining what's going on, how things are going. And I think sometimes they just misunderstand that it's not something that you don't want to do, it's something that you can't do, right?
Right.
And that's by federal statute, so that's understandable. On the other question I had was, I understand that you have system maintenance that gets performed on the online, like when you're going to pay GRT or things like that, right? So for example, just this past weekend, you guys had system maintenance, right? Mm-hmm. So the system was down completely. Who determines when the system maintenance will be conducted, or when it's scheduled?
That's something that really the Office of Technology kind of works with us on. So we don't dictate when the system maintenance, of course, will occur. I mean, we do have some level of input if there is downtime, but the system does have to be maintained. I don't exactly understand the technicalities of it, but that's something that really is driven by the Office of Technology.
Yeah, so perhaps in the future, maybe working with OTEC, that the system doesn't go down on the weekend that they're paying GRT, right? So,
Yeah,
there's folks that wanted to pay GRT, but they couldn't because the system went down over the weekend. People wanted to, if they're going to do a system, let's not try and do it to when we're collecting revenue versus, off times when we're not collecting. And I think when you're paying your GRT, and because it's due by the 20th, right?
Right.
That perhaps was not the best time for the system to go down for system maintenance. And perhaps input, and that's what I was getting over the weekend from folks was, why did they have to perform the system maintenance in the time that we needed to, be on the system to do these things, right? And the convenience of online, we want to make it as convenient as possible, but yes, the last moment, the last few moments before the deadline, people are trying to get online and they can't because it was down for system maintenance. But understandable, OTEC is the one that performs that. And I think the other portion here was phone system, right? Your telephones, folks not answering the phones and things like that. You're busy and we understand. Have you ever considered going from an automated phone system back to an actual person answering the phones? And
Yes. In fact, I want to share, one on your point regarding the system maintenance, thank you, point well taken. The other issue with regards to having a call center, we actually just today had our customer call center supervisor begin today. We're very excited because we have Irish has actually been very instrumental in setting up a little area where we have computer stations. And so it's great to see it because if you go there, it looks like we're real, It looks like we have a real call center. And I think that's the first part, is not being or operating like we're a kind of a backyard operation. We're real. We actually have a space that's set aside in Irish. Again, I have to say Irish and her team did a great job. And also our IT group. We have an actual place, and I invite you to come and see it if you like. Of course, we still have to fill it with more people, but it's really very nice and very professional, and I believe that that's going to be very helpful. So we actually are identifying and trying to hire actual live people to answer so that we don't have a lot of the issues that we're having. And we're excited because the individual that we did hire as the call center supervisor, she served as a call center supervisor for many years in private industry. So we're excited to have her on board. And so, we want to thank you for that comment and let you know that that's something that we're really working on.
Yeah, that's great to hear. That's really actually great news to hear. And I think moving on with automation, right? We file online, everything is done online. And I think when people actually get their phones answered and you're able to source it to where it needs to go, people feel better on the other end, especially when they're trying to pay their taxes or, make a payment over, whatever it may be. But I'm glad that you guys recognize that and you guys took action. Everything else has been great. I've used the online registration for vehicles. I think that has really worked well with the inspection stations. I just go to inspection station and they process my vehicle registration. I get the copy and then I get the tags in the mail. So I think everything that you guys are doing has been working out for the greater good of the public. And I look forward to working with the oversight chair and the chairman of OFB to see what we can do to continue. Because I think you guys are the breadwinners of the government. And we need to give you guys the resources that you need to ensure that the funds that are coming in or the funds that are due to the government, like I said in the beginning, is paid to the government. And the only way to do that is to give you guys the folks that you need. And, hopefully that we'll be able to do that. And I look forward to working with everyone in that manner. But thank you so much, Director, Deputy, and to the ASO. Thank you guys. And to your team up at Rev and Tax, please let them know that they are truly greatly appreciated. Not a day goes by that, something that Rev and Tax does is not recognized. So you get the good, but you also get the bad with it, right? But when the good always outshines the bad, then we just continue to drive on, and that's all we can do. But thank you guys so very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Senator Brown, comments or questions, ma'am?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Certainly after almost 2.5 hours, I certainly commend the Rev and Tax team that's here for their patience as well with the time this afternoon. I do want to start off because it is a point of concern that I have, and I know other members, including the Oversight Chair for Tax has, and I know to your Deputy Leon Guerrero, this issue with regards to the stamp tax is something that a lot of us are keeping an eye on. Most of us, particularly on the Republican side of the aisle, don't have so much issue in looking at privatization for services that I don't look at as regulatory. Regulatory responsibility of government is something certainly for me as a policymaker. I like to see the government maintain control over that. And certainly your background in law enforcement, I know you can appreciate why that would be an expectation for the government to execute. That issue's been quite controversial. I mean, it happened in the last term, but we recently had that issue brought up again because our Senator Sabina had introduced legislation to repeal it. And you see by the vote how close that issue is and how divided we are. I mean, it's just a very, very narrow margin under which that particular bill did not pass this past term. And the concern we have, granted, historically perhaps this tax stamp has not been put in place, and we are concerned, of course, about the revenue that the government is losing. But this particular issue has almost a cloud of who's going to get the contract, and that is bothersome because we wouldn't want to think that that's the focus of it. We would want to think the intent is, and it's not on you because obviously it came from legislation, but we wouldn't want to think that the intent is to set this up for a certain business interest. And that's a concern we have, I'm sure members of the public have. I mean, as we privatize these services, if we determine there's a need to do that, we want to ensure that it's a fair and even playing field so that there's no speculation that somehow we are tailor-making legislation to benefit certain public interests. And we'll be watching that. Hopefully we'll see what your ultimate decision is. But certainly for my preference, it's something I would want to see the government and Department of Revenue and Tax continue to do. And while I understand there are probably a number of steps that are going to have to be taken to keep that within the house of the government, I think you guys have demonstrated time and time again how you're able to absorb these responsibilities and enhance them and take them up a step higher. And certainly, Director Shimizu, that's something we're very pleased to see. I wish we could see this with every Government of Guam agency. I think the biggest challenge any governor has is trying to have a cabinet of capable, competent people, have a little bit of, political sprinkle so they're aware of that side of the house, but certainly able to come into a department or agency and take it to the next level. Particularly with Rev and Tax, because anytime the members of the public have to interface with the government, it's historically always been frustrating, just in general. You know, and we put these regulatory requirements on our citizens. We require them to get, you know, driver's licenses. We require them to register their vehicles. We require them, if they run a business, they've got to pay their GRT and all these other things. And yet, historically, we put them in a long line and we make it difficult for them to do it. And I'm thinking anytime, if I'm standing in line to pay the government of Guam, gosh, if you're the least painful you make it for me, the least time I have to think about it and cry, the check I got to write or whatever it is, the better for both parties involved. So I concur, as my other colleagues here have commended you this afternoon. You do, and you've worked very hard. You're one of the directors that are very visible, and you articulate the information out to the public as these issues come up, and it's really appreciated. People are paying attention. And I know it requires a lot of time and effort. You're probably wondering if you just go home into the closet and then you're back at Rev and Tax the following morning, probably not enough time to do the things you need to do at home or with your family. But we're definitely seeing the benefits. I mean, Senator Ada actually recommended to me, because one of my cards was, the registration was due last month. I think I had it like a week before the month expired. And he said, hey, why don't you do it this way? And I did, and I was pleasantly surprised. It didn't take long. You know, I got my registration printed out. My tag came in a few days, and the only time I remembered I had to put it on the car was when we had the police chief here for his budget. I thought, oh, I better go put it on my car. So they're not looking for me because I forgot to put the tag on the vehicle. But these are very important steps that are being made that you're doing, and I think you're certainly setting the trend of what the public in general wants to see in terms of government service, to make it as easy and as uncomplicated as possible to interface with the government. Because it just, you know, people would dread, I would dread, gosh, if next year I have to go redo my driver's license, and I'm going to go try your new process so that I don't have to stand in line and wait hours. Literally standing in hours for 2 or 3 hours or more, just physically standing inside the facility there to be able to get, you know, your driver's license process. So thank you so much for that extra effort that you're putting in place, because it's definitely noticeable. I did want to ask just a couple quick questions. I know we've been here for a couple hours, and I'm not going to want to belabor our time here, but I just wanted to ask, how are things progressing with your motor carrier division? I was looking at your staffing pattern, and you almost have half of your positions vacant. How is that coming along in terms of them being able to meet their requirements and doing their inspections? Because often you're used to seeing them on the side of the road, particularly with regards to large vehicles, pulling them over to make sure that they're in compliance with the requirements. So I just wanted to ask, what's the status of that with your motor carrier division?
Thank you, Senator. Let me go over my position in coming in. I actually recognize the motor carrier program and the federal funding that was keeping it working up there. Now, when I came in, we had, I believe, 3 or 4 personnel that were there. Most of the administrative officers were gone, so we had the inspectors that basically had almost stopped working, but we're still looking at the federal funding coming in. So I took it upon myself. I said, this is something that we can work on. It's a federal grant that's there. It's money coming in. I studied the history of it and work with the Honolulu office, who's the administrator of the grant and stuff. So we look at the challenges of actually reviving it, and it was doable. And I asked the director to help me revive the program. I was able to move one of the personnel who's a program coordinator over to MIXAP, which is the Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program. And we had worked with the Honolulu office, so we have actually taken I called it a sunken ship. And we have now updated the backlog of information that was required to satisfy the federal program. Now, there's many. The value of it is tremendous, because aside from the safety inspection program, is that It also has resources that we can use. We have the motor vehicles. We can hire more personnel. Of course, all of the safety equipment, we were borrowing the electronic lights from other agencies. That's something that we can actually procure from that thing. We can have radio communications. So to me, looking at it in law enforcement, I said, this is something not only as far as public safety is concerned. I used to admire these guys. They'll be in the roadside, and I'll look at them and say, yes.
And you see them right across the federal court building
Right,
regularly
exactly. So
doing
we're watching them.
inspections, yeah.
So when I came up there and I saw that it was at a standstill, I said, no, I want to take this on, and I'm still working on it. We're still communicating. I have great people on it, and we've probably, I want to say we've stabilized it, and we're working, I believe, we're authorized to start working with the funds. Is that where we're at? And we'll get this running. And again, there's many opportunities. We can. It can assist on the funding. Can we use the money to help fund the building? No. Anyway,
But
so
we
there's
do,
an
but we
office.
do get some level of reimbursement for some of our rentals, so that for the space that the mix-up uses, those monies, because they're allocated to that program, can be paid by them.
Well, I just think it would be good to get them back out there, because, I mean, we can take our vehicles to the safety
Yes.
check and get them checked and, make sure everything's in working
Oh, yes.
order.
Right.
It's not necessarily the same for the heavy equipment that's out on the road. And we had a recent case, certainly I read about in the media, obviously, but where an incident involved, a business vehicle, and an individual had been passed away as a result of an accident that happened.
Right.
And, just recently read that, I guess the issues were related to the actual equipment, that it was not, was not up to standards, so to speak, or proper maintenance was not undertaken on that particular vehicle that may have contributed to the demise of the individual. And again, I'm just reading what I'm seeing in the media. But that does raise a concern. I mean, how does a vehicle get to that point? And of course, for business owners, I mean, I'm sure they should be conscientious about that because of the liability that puts against them to be sued. And you would like to think everyone is conscientious about that, but in this particular case, if there's any truth about the status of where that particular truck was at the time of the accident, that's a concern. So it definitely shows the need for the service that you provide to do that type of regulatory inspection and enforcement, so that we can hopefully, for those that are not as responsible, then you enforce on your end and they can take corrective action so that we're all collectively safe. Because imagine if that, not just the individual that was a passenger in that vehicle, but the danger they could be to other people on the road, innocent people just going about their day and following all the rules and the speed limit, and then something adversely happens because the heavy equipment vehicle next to them has not been inspected and might not be up to standard, and then an accident happens where there is serious injury or death. So it's a very important division. So I wanted to ask that to find out where you're at, and I certainly look forward to seeing them back on the road doing what they were doing before.
They actually are out and doing inspections, and so in fact, one morning I was driving by the old Papas, and I saw our van there. So I called our motor carrier, the person who's involved in charge, and I asked, okay, what's going on? So our team actually is out, and they are doing inspections already. So
Well,
so
good.
they
And
are
I'd
out.
like to, it's just, I noticed it's like almost half the positions in the division and your staffing pattern are vacant. So certainly how that can be strengthened so that we can address those issues. Because obviously there are vehicles that are falling through the cracks, as it certainly could be the case in that most recent incident that we all read about. So
Thank you.
it would be good to do that. I also just quickly, and it's my last question, I'm sure there are others, but this will be my last today because I know it's been a long afternoon. With regards to your driver's license examiners also, I saw your staffing pattern that again, there's a lot of,
Yes.
you just have very few personnel in that. How is that coming along for you in terms of providing that service?
So with regards to the driver's license exam branch and the driver's license position, one of the issues that we've had that we've been working, at least trying to work through with DOA, and now our ASO is working on, is working on the position description and the way that particular position is rated. Because how it is rated, and it's likely because in the past we were actual examiners, not necessarily like driver's license, basically processing. So also, one of the rating points is the number of years that you've held a driver's license. So it's difficult. Of course, we do have people who are actively working there as LTAs. It's been difficult for our people who have already been working to be able to qualify for the position because they're not competitive, because a lot of them are quite young. So if I have a license for 50 years, I will be able to rate higher than somebody who's had a license only for 10. So one of the things that our Chief of Administration did in this last year before he left was transmit to the Department of Administration, HR branch, I guess an updated or recommended a change to that particular position so that we can work to remedy that.
Okay.
But to your point, Senator Brown, yes, we do want to expand the driver's license branch as well. We recognize that's an area that is in great need, and we don't, I think, I also agree that it's very difficult, for our people when they stand in line. I myself have stood in line. I remember in 2017 when I stood there on a Friday and I couldn't get out of work until 4. So I went there, stood for about 20 minutes until the person in front of me turned around with a sign that said, "The last person to be served."
Yeah.
And I said, "But sir, it's my birthday." And he said, "Well, it was my birthday 2 days ago." So it just so happened I was traveling that Sunday. I wasn't able to get my driver's license. It was my fault, I suppose. But I totally can recognize and sympathize with people, and that's why this particular effort, I actually wish that our driver's license online renewals and replacements could have been done last year. I'm just excited that we're slated to launch it within this fiscal year, and I can't wait. I think it's going to be great for our people.
Well, I think we're all excited. It's one less thing to complain about the government of Guam, and definitely in those areas where we directly interface with our residents, again, because we impose these regulatory requirements on our community, that we should facilitate and make it easier for them. Like I said, if I'm going to stand in line, it's one thing I'm standing in line if I'm going to get money, but if I'm standing in line to pay money, I think we should make that process as painless as possible, and even just having because of the COVID, but just the whole idea of the drive-through drop-off of your tax, and it makes it easier, especially in the workday, because people, they're probably going up their lunch hour maybe to do that, and anything we can do to facilitate and that everybody gets to move on, I think we can all appreciate that. I know there are other issues, Mr. Chair, but I think with this hour and the long period of time we've had our revenue tax people as well as ourselves sitting here, I think we all want to stand up and stretch. So I don't have any further questions, and thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Frank, simple question, maybe Daphne, you can answer it. What is the funding for the motor carrier?
I believe it's $350,000.
Okay, only because I see the vacancy that Senator Brown brought up. That was fully funded. I'm only familiar with this one, Frank. You don't need to explain about it. I used to work there. I'm very familiar with motor carrier.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm only concerned is that get it filled, get every penny you can get from the federal government, because they're supposed to contribute to pay the rent. They're a source of funding. I think you just need to work it where you can do what other agencies are doing. Get those folks to be maybe part of the GovGuam program. And as long as they understand, they sign the agreement, they understand that when the funding goes away, they go. But the U.S. Department of Transportation is not going anywhere. Exactly what Senator Brown brought up. We used to park on sidewalk. We park on different areas on the island because it's all about transportation here in Guam. That being said, remember we identified, asked you, let's work with you and let's find out exactly what total amount of funds you need to get you fully funded. Because you're like, several of the colleagues already mentioned it. You bring in all the funds. Let's get you to continue to do the great work you're doing and move forward. And when you mentioned 15,000 people on the first day of the filing, May 17th?
10,033.
Yeah, I was in that line. It only took me less than 5 minutes to file my taxes and pay it. The only reason why it took more than up to 5 minutes, because the person in front of me was asking for a pen to sign a check. That should have been done. You guys did a great job, great work up there. The committee will conclude this budget hearing, Ms. Shimizu, and to my colleagues. We'll continue to receive testimony. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, Housing, and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. Agustin at gmail.com or to my office, located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 South Marine Corps Drive, Tamuning, Guam. Since it was mercy for your attendance today. and participating in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. This budget hearing on Bill 55-36 CR relative to the Department of Revenue Taxation now adjourned. It is 5:40. Thank you. Drive safe. And let's hope the storm don't hit us tomorrow morning. Please be safe. Thank you.